In today's video, I'm going to talk about my initial reactions to using the new Canon EOS R5. I was so excited and nervous yesterday afternoon when my new Canon EOS R5 arrived because I had very little time to record an unboxing video and learn how to use the camera before a test shoot. But somehow I was able to get it all together. Now, during my test shoot last night with my model Marty, styled by the fabulous and ever helpful Pablo Roberto, my favorite stylist to work with, I was able to start and do a shoot to put the camera through its paces. Now, in order to do this, I recorded much of what I was shooting with an Atomos Shogun through the micro HDMI slot in the side of the camera. One side effect of doing this was that I was unable to look through the viewfinder and shoot at the same time, so I had to look at the monitor and compose my photos that way and operate the camera through that interface. So in this video, you'll see me staring at the ground a lot. I was really staring at the monitor. Now for lenses, I used my Sigma Art 85 and 51.4 lenses with the Canon EOS RF to EF converter. It might be EF to RF converter, but everything works out perfectly and I really enjoyed using the camera. First and foremost, I've got to tell you that I loved the autofocus. I set it up so that it would use continuous eye and face detection, and out of about 650 frames, only about 5 of them were out of focus. Now, I tested it at 1.4 and 2.8 and f8, and the results were great all around. Last night I did 4 different looks, and the first 2 were pretty similar to what you see me do a lot of the time. I used an Elinchrom Light Motive 120, which is a 16-sided deep softbox, and then I put it through 2 layers of Roscoe diffusion material. I've been experimenting with this lately in order to create really soft and gauzy images. I shot a lot of photos at f1.4 because I really wanted to get shallow depth of field and I wanted to see how the camera would handle using an 85mm with that sort of depth of field. And it worked out great. It went right to his face or to his eyes even while shooting full body. I also wanted to test it out at 2.8 and it worked out great once again with this look. Now, I tested these looks as well with my 5D Mark IV, which is the camera that I've been using for the last 2 years, and the 5D Mark IV had a lot of out of focus frames at these wide open f-stops. These scenes were really only illuminated with my modeling lamps. So I do know that there's going to be a difference between indoor and outdoor when comparing the older camera to the newer camera, but in the studio setting, the autofocus really kicked ass. That's all I can say about it. In my next look, I used a Nice Photo SN29 to project a window blind shape onto Marty's face and onto the background. Now, the autofocus did have some trouble some of the time with this look because essentially what was created with the modeling lamp was a bunch of horizontal zebra lines, and maybe it saw an eye and maybe it saw a face and maybe it didn't. But when I had difficulty, I just sort of tipped the camera up a little bit so that Marty's face was in the middle of the frame, and then it found him and focused on that. It didn't always use face detection or eye detection. I'm not really sure what these blue squares are called, but it was tracking it and it did maintain proper focus most of the time. Now, on my final look, I used a number of colored gels in order to create a really dramatic look. And this was the only time that the autofocus ran into any difficulty, well, more difficulty than the mini blind shot. So what was happening is that I was using, or I should say, Marty was posing with a sweatband between his face and the main light, which caused there to be some shadows going across his face, covering up the light that was hitting one of his eyes. This caused the camera to sort of hunt around a little bit, and I caught it focusing on one eye, and then the other eye, and then the bridge of his nose. But out of all of the pictures, there were only a few in this series, and I do mean like 2 or 3, that were out of focus. And this is something that I could never expect while shooting at around f4 with the 5D Mark IV in this sort of dimly lit scene. So I really loved the performance of the camera when it came to the autofocus. Now, one thing that I didn't like was that I had a lot of trouble getting my computer to recognize that there were pictures on the SD card that I put into the card slot. And that's when I started researching and I started realizing that the Adobe applications, I believe, do not presently work well with or work at all with the R5 files. And the only thing that would work are Canon's programs. So I don't use those programs, so I had to go and download them. And I went to the R5 support page, and lo and behold, they didn't actually have anywhere on that page where you could download the drivers. So I had to tell Canon's website that I was looking for them for my 5D Mark IV, and when I did so, I was able to download versions of the software from late July of 2020. And those applications did work, and I was able to download the images from my camera using the USB-C to USB-C cable and EOS Utility. It wasn't a great solution, but it did work. And then I was able to browse through and look at those photos using Canon's Digital Photo Professional, which I used to create the JPEGs that I used in this video, because last night I only shot RAW. Now, because of this limitation, I can't readily get RAW files into Lightroom. And Lightroom is the program that I use all of the time to do my photos. Now, there is one way that I could do it, and that would be to use Adobe's RAW DNG converter, and then that would create a DNG file, which then I could get into Lightroom. But when I do that, I'll be stuck using Adobe's color profiles, which I don't think produce very nice skin tones. I like to use camera standard or camera matching standard, which is the same thing as EOS standard, the picture style that you shoot by default with Canon cameras. And this produces the best skin tones. So because of this software limitation that exists right now, I can't really tell you if I like the image quality in the R5 photos better than the image quality from my 5D Mark IV photos. Now, while comparing these JPEGs, which I think is the closest I can get to sort of apples to apples, I did notice that with my first two looks, the skin tone was better with the R5, or just sort of snapped a little bit better. I don't really remember anything of significance with the mini blind look, but with the color gel look, I found that the 5D Mark IV photos actually looked a little more contrasty and crispy right out of the camera. And that just means that with the R5 photos, I'm gonna have to apply a little bit of dehaze or contrast and everything will be fine. Now, this could just be a matter of me maybe having a brighter light coming into the camera at that particular time, or it could be the cameras themselves. But because of this limitation, I really can't check that out. Another feature of the R5, which I think might be a little underrated, is that you can shoot in a 4:3 format. Now, I don't know why it's 4:3, but that comes close to an 8:10 ratio, which is what you have to use on Instagram. I know that a lot of my clients are gonna use my pictures on Instagram. So I'm always shooting and I'm always thinking about framing for 8:10. Now, one problem is that this ends up causing there to be a lot of debris, let's say, at the top and bottom of my frames, where I'm showing a little more of the floor off of my set than I need to, or maybe I've actually got the hair light sticking into the top of the frame. The R5 allows you to shoot in a 4:3 ratio. I hope that with a firmware update, they will make this 8:10 so that it will work well for Instagram. But last night I shot everything in 4:3, which caused there to be an automatic crop when I got it into Digital Photo Professional. And while I was looking through the viewfinder or looking onto my monitor, I was seeing everything in a 4:3 ratio. But when I got it into my computer and I clicked on the crop tool, I was able to move around this 4:3 crop on my 2:3 photo. so none of the information is missing. But one of the good things about this is that when I'm shooting for a client and I need to upload JPEGs for them to proof, I don't have to worry about cropping everyone perfectly with my, varied amount of extra stuff at the bottom and top. It's already done for me right in the camera. So this is going to be a huge thing for me, but not as huge of a thing as the autofocus. Now, one of the hot button issues that people love to talk about is this camera overheating while shooting video. And I do actually shoot a fair amount of video for my clients. But even in considering this camera before I knew about the overheating issue, I never planned to use the R5 as my A camera. I have a C200 for that, and that's what I'm using right now to record this video. I think the R5 would be a great B-roll camera, and I'm gonna put it on my Ronin, I'm sure, the next time I have a booking and put it to use. However, I feel that people are sort of giving the camera a really hard time because they're expecting it to do something, shoot 8K raw footage for an eternity, and they're upset that it can't do that. Now, that's something that no other camera can do. I would really wish that it would shoot Cinema Raw Light 4K like my C200 so I could match those two files perfectly in a timeline, but maybe that will come with firmware in the future. I feel like the complaints from a lot of people about this camera is sort of like saying that I want a Tesla sports car that's great for road trips. It's like you're asking for this high performance vehicle that's going to be able to drive 1,000 miles while you're constantly gunning the accelerator. And unfortunately, right now with technology where it is, I just don't think it's gonna work out that way. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna keep using this camera over the next few weeks, and I'm gonna end up hopefully processing some images in Lightroom so that I can compare between the 5D Mark IV and the R5 for you. So until then, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those below. And as always, stay safe and have a great day.